First up is the debut album from Alt with From the New World. This is some Swedish progressive metalcore that really does cover everything that you would want from this kind of sound. It's genty, it's thal, it has all those onomatopoeias that the gent and thal progressive metalcore fans love so much, but it has this great layer of dark atmosphere going on throughout it as well. Sometimes it gets a little lighter, sometimes it gets a little bit darker, but that atmosphere never leaves, and I really think that's what makes it stand out. Mix in some really great production styles, mixing and mastering where you can hear everything shine, and you have one of the finest progressive metalcore releases of the year. If you're looking for a band that mixes Tesseract and textures, this is the band for you. Next up is the latest release from Blood Incantation with Absolute Elsewhere. This is 2 songs, 6 tracks total, 3 tracks for each song, and it's some of the most expansive death metal that you're going to hear in 2024. You'll get that brutal technical death metal that they started off as. You're going to get that dark wave, synthwave, Tangerine Dream inspired synth work that they're kind of known for now, but they also elevate themselves once again on this album. Starting off with the Stargate, it is that mix of that brutal death metal mixed with the synthwave, and once you know it, Tangerine Dream shows up on this release as well. The second full-on track, The Message, is where the band starts to expand, where they become more progressive death metal, more psychedelic, more experimental, and I love everything about it. This is easily one of the best death metal albums of 2024, no matter the subgenre. Blood Incantation has now cemented themselves as one of the finest death metal bands of the 21st century. Go pick this one up and have your jaw hit the floor. Next up, we have Mammoth Caravan with their debut LP, Frostbitten Galaxy. This Arkansas band combines so many bands that I love of the sludgy doom variety. Mastodon, Burst, Torch, The Ocean, even High in Fire. Everything going on here is just absolutely killer. No 2 songs sound the same, but they all fit together so perfectly. The production style is just raw enough, but just pristine enough, where you can hear everything that's going on, but it doesn't feel like it's going too far in one direction. This is a debut album from a band that I really can't wait to see what the sophomore album is gonna all be about. This is how you keep sludge metal interesting, and one of the finest examples in 2024. Next up is Soro Doar Roa with Monde. This is the 5th album from a very prominent French band that combines the best of goth rock, dark wave, and post-punk rolled into one. Despite this being my first foray with the band, I have to go back and check out everything they've done up to this point because this is absolutely my kind of music. It's The Cure, it's the Sisters of Mercy, it's Joy Division, and it's their own mixes of their own other inspirations and things that they wanted to bring into the table. It sounds so familiar, but it sounds so unique. It's a modern throwback that hits home just as hard in 2024 as it would in 1987. It's hauntingly calm, just like the style calls for, but it has such a groove to it that you could really feel like if you went to goth prom, you would be all over this stuff. If you're a fan of anything that I just described, you owe it to yourself to give this one a shot. It's one of my favorite non-metal albums of the year, and it just might be for you as well. Next up, we have Temple of Dread with God of the Godless. Old school death metal has been making a huge impact over the last several years, and it's still something that I really enjoy. I love the fact that a newer generation is going back and listening to the old school death metal and just perfecting it just enough to make it contemporary. And that's what Temple of Dread does here. With this 5th album in 6 years, it really does have a huge death sound. I also hear some Morbid Angel going on, but especially compared to their other albums, I hear more elements of like Pestilence, Deicide, Morgoth, and even Asphyx on this album. But again, more than anything, death. It's another modern throwback that is just as much for the old school as it is the new school, and if you want that in your death metal, you need to give this one a proper listen. Up next, we got Undeath with More Insane. And in speaking of that old school death metal sound, Undeath is back with their least ODSM album to date. But don't get me wrong here, it is still chock full of that old school death metal sound, but it feels more expanded upon. There's more things that you wouldn't necessarily expect from this, like breakdowns, some more hardcore riffs, guitar solos, and many other things that you really don't hear from Undeath, which is so cool to see them expand upon their sound because they are more than just old school death metal. Of course, there is that brutal early day Cannibal Corpse sound that they've always had, but again, just more expanded upon. The band knows when to ebb and flow on this album, and it's one of the most satisfying death metal albums to listen to from start to finish because of that ebb and flow. If you love Undeath, if you love the sound, Undeath is doing everything right, and they have become more, sorry for the pun, more insane. And finally, for brand new stuff out today is the brand new album from Windrose with Trollslayer. Windrose has become one of the most prominent names in power metal, or they're a meme band, depending on how you look at it. But regardless of any of that, you cannot deny that Windrose has written some of the most catchy songs in power metal in recent times. The band knows how to write a song, they know how to write a chorus, and they know how to make everyone in the crowd sing along. You cannot take that away from them. With Trollslayer, the band continues on doing what they're best at, writing dwarven metal. What else could you possibly ask for in a band like this? Windrose, of course, updates things just enough not to be the same as they've done in the past, but it is that Windrose sound that you know and love. This album is clearly meant to be in the live setting, so if you have the opportunity to go see the band live, do so. It's gonna be one of the most fun times you could ever have, and when they start playing songs from Trollslayer, you'll be glad that you did. Now starting off with everything I've missed along the way, starting with the brand new album from Cyborg Octopus with Bottom Feeder. And this is one I would have loved to have included last week, but sadly, I just didn't get the promo. That's the breaks, little man, break it down. But that said, this is by far the best Cyborg Octopus album to date. It is their most musically diverse, it's their grandest display of instrumentation, songwriting, and overall experience. It's got some of their heaviest breakdowns, it's got some of their wackiest prog riffs, and motifs that feel otherworldly, all while exploring so many different genres from tech death to synthwave to grind to BT bam worship to pop and so much more. Of course, this won't be for everybody, there's a lot of genre changes that happen in here, but for those who enjoy that, you're not going to hear another album like this in 2024, especially not one done with such efficiency and authenticity. I really hope this is the album that breaks the band into the stratosphere because they've earned it at this point. Now, go check it out and see if you agree. Up next is a band that I absolutely apologize for getting wrong. It is Trom Doheims with Verso Casasa. This is another fine recommendation from the Harsh Volks podcast. This is the third album from this Italian one-man band, and it's the perfect blend of the atmospheric black metal that I love so much. It gets folksy and woodsy like a band like Egalog. It has great emotional gut-punching moments like Panopticon, and it knows when to get into the dark, otherworldly feeling of black metal of a band like Wolves in the Throne Room. It grips you and it doesn't let go from beginning to end, and I'm flabbergasted by how much I love Self. You can really hear the true dark soul of atmospheric black metal done right, and it's easily one of the finest displays of the genre in 2024. Go check it out now and see what atmospheric black metal truly can. Up next is the sophomore album from North Carolina band Veta with Summer. And this kind of does feel like a summer album despite the fact that it's coming out in the fall. Maybe that irony's on purpose, but you'll be really glad to know that this features past and present members of Lord Almighty, Between the Buried and Me, and Mo Yoink in this band, and they throw all contentions out the window and create something that is truly near and dear to them. It's a black and roll style where you can hear bands like Motorhead and Wasp, but you can also hear bands like Tribulation and Chapel of Disease as well. It's such a creative mix of ideas that may sound familiar, especially if you're into the black and roll style, but it sounds so unique at the same time. This album is quite the trip for anyone who enjoys those styles, and it's just left of center enough from what you might expect. It's been quite the highlight over the past few weeks, and if you're into the style, you need to check it out for yourself and see if you agree. Next, we have the debut album from this Pennsylvania black and thrash band known as Vicious Blade with Relentless Force. In 2024, we've had a lot of great black and thrash, black and roll bands, but Vicious Blade does something a little bit different that I truly appreciate, where it really feels like first wave black metal like Venom, and then it's updated just enough, a little bit more of that with like the darker blackened side of Sodom, and of course a huge influence from Slayer. The production is just raw enough, but so clear. It's fun, catchy, and full of instant earworms, and it feels like you're in the middle of a pit back in 1985. This thing flies by. It's only 9 songs, under 28 minutes, short, sweet, and everything you love about the genre. And if you do love that, I can't imagine you would not love this album. And finally today we end things with Weather Systems with Ocean Without a Shore. Danny Kavanagh is back, doing a sequel to the most prominent era of Anathema in my heart. Basically everything from We're Here Because We're Here, all the way up to the first 3/4 of Distant Satellites. It's the era where the band became its biggest, brightest, darkest, everything that you love about that progressive, atmospheric, cinematic, and post-rock sound is on this album, just with Danny Kavanagh and Daniel Cardoso. They took some liberties to do things like Are You There Part 2 and Untouchable Part 3, which took some intestinal fortitude to be able to do sequels to those highly regarded songs, but they do it with such authenticity, and it just shattered me. When I first heard this album, I instantly cried, and it reminded me so much of why I love this era of Anathema so much, and I'm so glad that Weather Systems is here to do this to me all over again. First up, we have Alias No One with Weight of the World. This is a debut album from a Finnish progressive melodeath band that does some pretty radical stuff, and it sounds right up my alley. There's a little bit of that progressive melodeath like I mentioned, goth rock, and other great moments. It kind of reminds me of the third era of Amorphous, think Skyforger, Silent Waters, that kind of stuff. It's quite a unique experience, and they do things in their own way. It's dark, the lyrics hit hard, especially for the state of the world that we live in, and the musicality on display is on point. This is how you take the genres of progressive metal and melodeath and a little bit of goth and turn it on its ear. It's so catchy, but they know when to be heavy in all the right spots, and it has that great instant replay value. Give this one a shot if you're looking for something different yet familiar in the melodeath world. I can't imagine you'd be disappointed. Next up, we have Cemetery Skyline with Nordic Gothic, and this is an Album of the Year contender for me, and it's not even close. Ever since I first heard Violent Storm the day that it came out, I knew that this album was going to be so full of potential, and everyone on board does everything they can to make one of the greatest gothic metal albums of the year. When you feature past and present members of Dark Tranquillity, Sentenced, Insomnium, and Amorphous, of course you're going to have some of that melodeath and gothic sound seeping through, but when it comes to that gothic sound, it doesn't really sound like any of the other bands that they've done previously. You'll hear some 80s influences, you'll hear some of the Peaceful 3 influences, and you'll hear some modern gothic styles going on as well. It is straight up goth in every sense of the genre, but just expanded upon and a real love letter to the genre. 2024 has been an incredible year for everything goth rock and gothic metal, and this is just a shining example of how you do it. Up next is Clean Break with We Are the Fire. This is a sophomore album from a conglomeration featuring James Durbin of American Idol fame, and also featuring members of Riot V and Striper. And they make some of the most intriguing melodic metal, AOR, and hard rock that I've heard this year. It is just bordering on more of the extreme sides of metal, while still being some of the most mainstream rock that I've heard. It's so intriguing, and there's no real way for me to be able to really describe it without you checking it out for yourself and seeing what I'm talking about. It fuses all of this together to make it feel like it has this great mass appeal for the heaviest of metal fans, the hardest of rock fans, and anyone who would just turn on FM radio. It's a fun album from start to finish, and if this sounds like it could be your bag, you just might agree. Give this one a shot. Next up is The Crown with Crown of Thorns. In what is essentially their self-titled album, because they started off as Crown of Thorns, the band really knows how to show off their classic sound of that melodic death metal with thrash metal infused inside all of it. But what makes this truly stand out is the fact that they can expand upon their sound. On this album, I hear moments of industrial, I can hear some black metal elements, and of course that signature Crown sound that we all know and love. This is just a band that just feels so invigorated, and it's just so fantastic to see because they've been putting out stellar album after stellar album ever since they started, and it just feels like that motivation just keeps getting stronger and stronger with every single release. If you've never checked them out before, I think this is the perfect album to start off with. Seriously, give this one a shot. Up next is Dragony with Hic Sint Dracones, and I apologize if I got that album title wrong, but it's great to see Dragony back after 3 years with their signature blend of very catchy, melodic symphonic power metal. Dragony isn't doing anything that's outside of their wheelhouse on this album, but they know how to do their signature formula with absolute solid tenacity. It's just fantastic to see this happening in 2024. It's the kind of power metal that will put a needed smile on your face in 2024, and we all need that this year. It's fun, catchy, whimsical, filled with incredible solos and signature power metal moments that remind you why you are a fan in the first place. And if you are a fan of power metal, you need an album like this right now. Put this one on, relax for just a little under an hour. You owe it to yourself for making it this far into the year. Up next is Hell is Other People with Moray. This is a sophomore album from a Canadian post-black band that incorporates some post-hardcore, screamo, and emo elements into a way that makes for one of the most emotional black metal albums of the year. I know this won't be for everybody, but if you just give it a chance, you'll see what kind of emotional elements hit here, and it strikes you so very, very hard. It is so cathartic with the musical experience, the lyrics just hit me so very, very hard. And when you mix that with cascading and transcendental black metal, and of course the post-black, it is just one of those albums that you cannot turn off. You need to hear it from start to finish. It's a perfect example of how black metal can be a gut punch emotionally and rip your heartstrings to shreds. Give this one a shot whether you're a diehard black metal fan, you grew up listening to 2000s post-hardcore, or you're just looking for something different. This might be for you. Up next, we have House of Lords with Full Tilt Overdrive. I love that pinball reference. And wouldn't you know it, the pinball reference is also in the album cover as well. But House of Lords has been around for over 3 decades, getting close to 4 decades now, and they just make some of the greatest AOR, melodic metal, hard rock, all of that power-driven stuff that you love so very much. And they have not lost a step at all over the past decades. And Full Tilt Overdrive is a perfect example of that. It's just done in 2024, but it's sounds just like you remember, just updated slightly enough. This is the kind of stuff that you put on when you need a smile on your face. It takes you back in time, but you're still in 2024. And of course, House of Lords is just one of those bands that has that authenticity behind it that you're not going to hear from anyone else. It's great to see the band continuing to go into their strongest moments into 2024, and if you check it out, you just might agree. Next up, we have Kazora with The Source. This is a debut album from a French outfit that is tailor-made for 2024 prog nerds, the new fans of Gojira thanks to the Olympics, and hey, there's some other stuff in here as well. It's great to see bands that are being influenced by Gojira because they really know how to do those deep, really thought-provoking riffs and lyrical content, but I also love it when a band can take that as an influence and create something of their own. Of course, it's down-tuned and there's a lot of intensity going on, but I also hear some genre bending like someone like Devin Townsend would do. I hear that aggressive genre bending that I hear from a band like Orbit Culture, and hey, do I hear some Catatonia in here? I do hear that as well. It's quite heavy and catchy at the same time. It can hit for the most brutal metal fans, it can hit for more of the mainstream fans that have just discovered Gojira, and so very, very much more. This might go under the radar for some, but let's change that. Check this one out and hear some awesome, dark, progressive metal. Next up is a band name that I hope I get right, Sandvice with Standing in the Fire. This is a band that feels like it was meant for me in the early 2010s, but doing it now in 2024. It's that perfect blend of progressive sludge metal. I'm talking early day Baroness, mid-era Sword, and the prog era of Mastodon, all combined together with some other unique blends, herbs, and spices to create a very sludgy, proggy, heavy metal sound that can hit just as much for the Black Sabbath fans and all of us, and the new school fans of all of us. Every song is super catchy, mesmerizing, and puts you into a unique trance. Seriously, if you love albums like Crack the Sky, Blue Record, and especially Warp Riders, you need to check this album out immediately. We need an album like this right now, and the band pulls it off to pure perfection. Next up, we have Vicious Rain with There Is Beauty in Letting Go. What a title. And finally, this is the last of the stuff that's coming out today. This is a debut album from a Swiss alternative metalcore band that really hits the perfect balance between heavy and mainstream. They hit some of the heaviest breakdowns and riffs that I've heard in this genre in 2024, and they also make it so accessible, especially in the choruses. You know, a lot of metalcore bands have been pulling this off since the 2000s, and that second wave of metalcore sound is very, very strong in 2024. This is another perfect example of how to do that right. This is another band that should be on mainstream rock radio right now over here in the States, and maybe one day they will be. But if you dig this style of metalcore, you really should give this one a chance, as it is one of the finest examples of the year, and it might just strike a chord. And now for what I missed over the past weeks is the band known as Asar Hoden with Era. And this is some of the most emotional black metal I've heard all year, no matter the subgenre of black metal. From the riffs that'll pull on your heartstrings to the heartbreaking vocals that'll tear your soul apart. This is a German band that really knows how to get emotional, and it makes you question everything. This is tailor-made for the AOP Records crowd. Like if you love Hardcore for the Sky, Groza, Agripni, all of those types of bands, this is a band that you need in in your life. It is a soul-crushing album. Whether you can speak German or not, it will affect you emotionally just by the dedication and emotion that is sung and played. And those are always the best kinds of albums that transcends all of that. Grab some tissues, have an existential cry, and enjoy one of the best post-black metal albums of the year. Up next is something from my neck of the woods in Minneapolis. This is Feral Light with their 5th album, A Reckoning with the Intangible. Now, this is a very intriguing black metal album, where it is that old school, raw black metal sound, but it's done with just enough crust punk to elevate things and make you feel like you're going through such adrenaline, but it also knows how to pull things back, spread things apart, and make it feel like very post-metal, black metal, not post-black, combining those two genres, and just making things stretched out into songs that last over 15 minutes long. It's a combination of both of those. Whether you love the faster stuff or the slower stuff, it is pure black metal from start to finish, and it really does feel feral. There's no better way to describe that. It's one of the most ruthless albums of 2024, especially in the black metal vein. If you enjoy this kind of stuff, I can't imagine you'd be disappointed. Next up, we have some gothic death doom from the band The Ghost I've Become with Asylum. Finnish gothic doom is some of the best out there, and this debut album from this quartet is exactly what I need right now. A band that mixes the likes of November's Doom, Catatonia, and especially Daylight Dies is something that just hits right at home in the gothic doom territory for me, and that doesn't always exist in new music. But when it's done right, it's astounding. It's just raw enough, but it is crystal clear as well. It's emotionally driven, and it has such a great dark sense of melodic riffs and songwriting. It takes the best of the genres and makes it their own. It's not too slow, not too fast, it just feels satisfying. It has an overall sense of dread that makes gothic death doom work so very well, and it's one of the best in gothic death doom in 2024. Pick this one up and see if you agree. Up next, we got some more gothic death doom from the band Inver Noir with Aiming for Oblivion. This time, it's coming from Italy, and it is some absolutely incredible stuff, especially for a debut album. It is haunting, dreadful, so full of emotions. It hits the styles of bands like My Dying Bride and Shores of Null, and wouldn't you know it, the live singer of Shores of Null is the singer of this band. The band creates such a tear-jerking form of doom metal that will hit the darkest parts of your soul and not let up until it's over. You'll feel trapped, you'll feel lost, you'll feel like you can't get away. But really, if you love this style, do you want to get away? I don't think so. This is such a fantastic display of gothic doom, and if you love gothic doom, you need this album immediately. Next up, we have one of the most intriguing albums I've heard in such a long time, from the band known as Lowen, with Do Not Go to War with the Demons of Mazadran. This is a sophomore album from a UK outfit that combines progressive, doom, almost black metal, and Middle Eastern elements that create such a fascinating trip. It's like if you mix Mastodon, Subterranean Masquerade, and Agercocky combined together. Yes, you heard that right. It pushes things to almost the extremes without going too far into it, but also knows when to let the riffs ride and just take you on this mystical journey that you will not expect. It's the kind of album where my words can only do so much for you, but if you love progressive doom, this is something that I think you would really, really enjoy. Give this album a spin, take a trip, I think you'll be so glad that you did. Next up, we have Mood Hoover with Love and Loss, the brand new venture from Neil Elsgood, formerly of the project And Now the Owls Are Smiling, which is one of the most dark, atmospheric black metal bands that I've heard in the 2010s and 2020s. Now that that project has been laid to rest, he's taking another form of dark, atmospheric genres, funeral doom. This is a funeral doom album done to the absolute T. It's haunting, brooding, it feels like you're trapped in a fog-covered graveyard and trying to escape before it sucks you in. With most songs over the 12-minute mark, just 2 of them under the 10-minute mark, this is quite the journey of an album if you are not expecting it. It feels perfect for this time of year with autumn and Halloween on the horizon. It's the kind of album you put on late at night, and if anything interrupts your experience, you'll jump out of your seat in fear. I can't express it any better than that. If you love funeral doom, if you love that raw feeling that it comes with it, especially in the atmospheric form, you need to check this one out. And also go back and check out And Now the Owls Are Smiling. And finally, we end things with Realm of Wolves, with Hegemon of Cold Seas. We end things with more post-black, coming from the sophomore album of this Hungarian band that hits all the red spots of black metal for this category. It's just raw enough, but there's enough polish in here so it doesn't sound unlistenable. It is very emotional, filled with despair, hopelessness, and loss, everything that you expect from the genre. If you like like the stuff of Wilderness, Alcest, Vatnat Viscar, and even Woods of Ypres at times, I think you'll be able to find something to appreciate here. If you're not a fan of raw production, this could easily turn you off, but if you do appreciate that atmospheric moments that goes in all of it, I think you'll put a trance over you and create this otherworldly feeling that you simply can't get from any other black metal this year. It hits in a way that you feel like you're about to hit your demise in 2024, and trust me, that's closer than ever before this year. Give this one a shot and see how your end may come to fruition in the best way possible. Up first, we have Canorus with Wormtails. This is the third album from this tech death yet very melodic death metal band, and I find that this band is exploring a lot more of what's possible within themselves with this album. The music is way more melodic and has more of a Black Dahlia feel than ever before, but you're still going to hear those tech death elements of bands like Veil of Panath, Arsis, and even Gorod. But mixing that in with that Black Dahlia style of American melodeath is just a perfect combination, and it just hits right at home for people that have been looking for this kind of sound. It's oddly catchy, especially those not expecting it, but whether they're going full bore or they know when to let the melodies do the talking, this might be an album that might be worth your time if you want to explore what melodic, technical death metal is all about. Next up, we have a band that I deeply apologize for getting the name wrong right off the bat. Capilla Ardiente with Where Gods Live and Men Die. This is another third album, but this time from a Chilean doom metal band, and they have made some of the most epic doom metal of 2024. It really does hit that Epicus Doomicus Metallicus, which of course comes from Candlemass. It's a major influence on this album, but you start to hear other bands in that epic doom metal sound as well. The production is crisp and clear, the songwriting takes you on a journey with a lot of twists and turns, and the overall delivery is just something to behold. It's a modern throwback while expanding things just enough. There's been a lot of great albums this year in the epic doom metal sound, but we always need more, and I'm always happy to see a band coming back and doing some of their peak performance and definitely delivering the goods. What a killer album. Up next is Deserts of Mars with Dead Planet Exodus, and this is the second album from this band who have been around for the last 18 years, but with a new lineup, a new way about how they're going about things. I really think that they have put out the better of the two albums so far with this album. It's just a stronger presence, a really fun sci-fi concept throughout. It just reminds me so much of what I love about doom rock, doom metal, heavy metal, progressive rock. I hear elements of 70s classic rock in here, right up through 90s and 2010s stoner rock as well. Like, a way for me to describe it is like a mixture of Clutch meets The Sword. For some people, that's going to be right up your alley. For others, you might be a little hesitant. But I think if you give it a shot, you'll find one of the most catchy, fun, and out there doom metal releases in the doom rock world of 2024. Up next is Ensiferum with Winterstorm, and this is the revitalization album for Ensiferum that I didn't realize needed to happen within the band. And I say that because they added one key element to their very folky, melodic death metal sound. They started incorporating power metal, not just musically, because that's always kind of been there, but vocally. They started incorporating clean power metal vocals on this album, and I know some people are going to be turned off from that, especially if you're a tryhard, but I think for everybody else, this is exactly what the band needed to be able to stay fresh and stay wanting to be Ensiferum for years upon years to come. This is easily some of the best music the band has ever done, some of the catchiest moments that they've ever done, and when they come to the States here in 2025, I think it's all the more reason to go see them live. The band is revitalized, and I couldn't ask for anything more. Up next is Frozen Crown with War Hearts, and this is the fifth album from Frozen Crown, and it really does feel like they found their niche when it comes to power metal. It's fun, over the top, the production is crystal clear, the songwriting is jam-packed with everything that you love about power metal, and the overall intensity of the album is maxed out. You can definitely hear the influences of all the main and side bands of Rhapsody, and especially that Dragon Force influence more than ever before, but they still know how to make it their own. Frozen Crown is making some of the most solid power metal of 2024, and this is a year where we kind of need that, because so many bands are going into that modern metal route from the symphonic and power metal realms. I just love it when a band wants to make power metal, and this is one of the best examples that we have this year. Next, we have Funeral with Gospel of Bones. Funeral is one of the most underrated bands in doom metal in 2024. You're always going to hear things about like Paradise Lost and Early Day Anathema, and especially My Dying Pride, but Funeral was around there at the same time, and they've been going strong ever since then. It's a shame with that because Funeral is one of the most innovative bands in the genre, and they've never lost their authenticity. With the band's 7th album, they've expanded their sound beyond anything ever before. Of course, the Funeral doom sound is never going away, and they've always added some gothic doom, especially in the later albums, but 2 newer ingredients are part of this: classical and folk, and they also started adding some deep operatic vocals, more acoustic and folkish passages on top of all of it, making this a very rich, deep, rewarding, and emotional experience. Every Funeral album has its own experience, and this one is all about the dynamics, accessibility, and genre bending. If that sounds exciting to you in Funeral Doom, you need to check this one out. Up next is Immortal Bird with Sin Coherencia. It's been a while since the last Immortal Bird album, 2019 to be exact, but they've taken all that time from pre and post pandemic to really refine their sound and make for one of the most intense yet emotional experiences the band has ever done. Of course, it's always going to be layered in that grindy, blackened death metal sound, but they started incorporating more moments of things like crust punk, sludgy, post-metal moments in there too. So it's not just the over-the-top technical blazing fast stuff here, there's some slower stuff that really pulls at you. Whether the dynamics are going off, the band is pushing the limits, everything that they're capable of, and broadening their sound in a way that a lot of people have been wanting. It's everything that you love about the band, but just a new intensity behind it, making it their best album to date without question. It's a fantastic album for those who want a little bit more in their blackened death metal. Next up is the self-titled debut from the band Star Crazy, and they describe themselves as glam rock mixed with Rush, and I think that's a very fair example of what this band is all about. They combine that 70s hard rock, 70s funk rock, 80s glam, and prog rock into this very strange concoction that really does work for them. Imagine this strange mix of Thin Lizzy, Rat, Rush, and Wild Cherry, and you're starting to get the idea of what they're all about. In one particular song, they even say the words, "Don't call me metal, just call me experimental." And yeah, what else can you really say about that? They also have an acoustic ballad about Fry from Futurama, which I will say is 100% the reason why I chucked this album out in the first place. If you're looking for something that is a throwback but done with just enough modern technique, yeah, give this one a shot. And now for one of the most polarizing albums of 2024, depending on your genre, it is the brand new album from Swall The Sun with Shining. Swall The Sun, especially on the last couple of albums, have written some of the deepest, darkest death doom that you could possibly imagine. Now, the band has taken a bit more of a silver lining into their sound and created something that feels a bit more peppy, a little more optimistic, just in music. If you listen to the lyrics though, it's just as death doom as ever, but you can understand those lyrics just a little bit more, as the clean vocals are there about 75 to 90% of the time. And don't worry, old school fans, more of that death doom sound starts to come in on the latter half of the album. And when you have a producer that worked with bands like Blink-182 and A Day to Remember, that's just clearly gonna come off in some way. But when you listen to this, there's so much layers, so much dynamics, and everything that you love about Swall The Sun. I will say it's one of the most satisfying doom metal albums of the year. And finally, for the last album that's coming out today, it is the brand new album from Vianity, with The Final Element. Vianity is back and better than ever. The Swedish band's 6th album is their most dynamic and captivating album in their whole discography. Everything you love about the band is on full display, from their full-on power metal assaults to their laid-back melodic approaches, and adding some new influences that I'll wait for you to check out and hear for yourself. Vianity has made such an incredible power metal album that is just meant for everyone on the genre spectrum. No matter how serious you take your power metal, no matter how much fun you want to have in your power metal, this should satisfy both ends. I won't say it's revolutionary or reinventing the wheel or anything like that, but I will say it's completely and utterly solid from start to finish, and it gives you everything that you're looking for, and it'll make you come back more and more. In a genre that seems to keep getting away from power metal and going into the modern metal approach, isn't that all you could really ask for? Give this one a proper listen, no matter your love of the genre, and see if it's for you. Now it's time for all the albums that I've missed along the way, starting with the brand new album from Glarus, with The Stars Will Light the Way. I can't believe I missed this album. It feels like I should have caught it the week that it came out, but unfortunately albums do fall through the cracks sometimes. Although it's easy to miss out on a Glarus album, as this is their 17th album in 23 years, so it's bound to happen. But one thing that does make this one stand out is the fact that even after all this time and this many albums, the band has never lost a step. They're still writing some of their best musical arrangements ever. It's just full of that neoclassical and symphonic power metal that you love so much, the soaring vocals, the overall enjoyment that you just get from listening to the band. It's pure, authentic, neoclassical power metal. So many people try to imitate this, but they can never duplicate what this band is capable of, and it's easily one of the best neoclassical power metal albums of the year. Up next is the brand new album from Godspeed You, Black Emperor, with no title as of 13th of February 2024, 28,340 dead. And of course that reference is to everyone that has been killed due to the Gaza Strip, and everything that is going on between Palestine and Israel right now. If you never gathered it from their entire experience of over 30 years of existence, Godspeed is a very political band, even though they don't use any lyrics in their music. Of course the band continues on with their very cinematic, brooding, and varied post-rock that you know them for. The right kind of sound clips that really add to the dark atmosphere that they try to bring on. And especially for those that are reading my review, this will not be for everybody, but for those that enjoy post-rock with a message, Godspeed have done it again with an album that hits all the right notes and makes you feel soothed yet uneasy. That's what they've always done, and they're going to continue to do so. Continuing on with some more instrumental music, we got Masterboot record with Hardwares. And wouldn't you know it, this is the 12th album from this project, which I thought the band only had a couple albums, so I got a lot of back work to do. This instrumental cybernetic synthwave metal band continues to innovate with what they do. From when I first checked them out to what they're doing now, I really love the progression of what they do with that synthwave cybernetic sound. This time around, the theme of the album is the different components of a computer, and the song titles really match up with everything. The song RAM makes you think about what a RAM does on your computer. The CPU does the same thing. Everything, even the computer case, has a song title. It's definitely for the nerds, but when you just listen to the music, it's some of the best synthwave metal that you're gonna hear in 2024. It's the kind of album that actually might inspire you to make your own PC, and with the way prices of video game consoles are going for, I just might have to do that. Up next is Nasty Savage with Jeopardy Room. After 40 years, Nasty Savage is here and still making that dark power thrash that we've always known them for, writing things about the future of the world, the state of the world that we currently live in now, and the occasional naughty stuff. The soul of the band has changed so much over the years, but Nasty Ronnie is still fronting the band and wanted the band to get a little harder, a little faster, a little stronger, and a little darker this time around. For those that are not familiar, especially on this album, imagine a mix of Control Denied, Nevermore, Agent Steel, and Jagdpanzer, but just done with a little more tongue-in-cheek kind of feel between all of it, and you got Nasty Savage. Of course, the whole band's catalog is worth checking out, but this is easily the heaviest album that they've put out. And one particular song that you might not want to play when your parents are around. You'll hear it once, and you'll know what I'm talking about. It's just the kind of heavy album that'll put a smile on your face, and it deserves the attention that you can give it, so give this one a shot. Up now is Odius with Equilibrium Tool, and a lot of people like to think that Nile is the true Egyptian metal band. No, it's Odius. It's been 9 years since their sophomore album, and I'm so happy that they're back with their very dark, sophisticated blend of symphonic death metal and Middle Eastern folk metal, creating one of the grandest and sophisticated listening experiences you're gonna hear all year. Imagine a grandiose mix of Melekesh, Septic Flesh, Rotting Christ, and even a band like Orphan Land, and you're gonna find a real journey of the soul. It's dark, intricate, and it hits everything that you love about the extreme sides of symphonic metal, death metal, folk metal, everything in there. Check this one out to hear how metal is not just about being at the absolute extremes, but knows how to use those for pure effectiveness. Coming up next is another one that I deeply apologize for pronouncing wrong. It is Samsa's Trom with Kulk. This is a dark German symphonic gothic black metal band that has done something very intriguing this time around. While the album came out several months back, there's new versions of the album that are continuously coming out. Producers like James Stevenson have taken their approach and remixed and remastered the album to give it a little more low end and make it sound a little more death metal in its symphonic black metal sound. And Dan Swano actually took his approach to this one and gave it one of the most grandiose symphonic sounds that I've heard in a band this year. The original version is more raw and underground, so no matter what your flavor of how you like to listen to black metal, there's a production style for you on this album, and it shows just how great these songs truly are no matter what the production style truly is. It's one of the most satisfying listens, it's dark, so very evil sounding, and if that sounds like it's for you, trust me, it will be. Up next is Siren Oath with Loveless. It kinda sounds like it's an Italian symphonic power metal band that just turned into a modern metal band, doesn't it? Well, it's not. It's actually a post-black band from Poland, and this is their sophomore album, and it continues to blend the lines between black gaze, post-rock, goth rock, and black metal in a way that hits so many emotional moments, with the occasional moments where you can feel like their spirit enters your soul and rips it apart. It hits all the ranges you expect from the style, and with such emotional range, and you can really hear moments of bands like Alcest, Lantlos, Deaf Heaven, and Wilderness going on throughout the entire thing, and just an extra layer of sadness on top of all of it. I blame that all on the gothic side. This is an album you need in your life if you love the post-black sound. This should soothe the soul for anyone who enjoys the genre. And finally, we end things with the band Wolf Brigade with Life, Knife, Death. And if you couldn't tell from the band name and from the title, I think it pretty much gives away everything that you should expect from this band. It's 90s HMN to pedal death metal, which, you know, it's that raw Scandinavian death metal sound that you know and love, but it's also mixed with some crust punk to just make something that's blistering fast when it wants to be, slows down just enough when it needs to, but it's so full of that metalhead, punkhead, tongue-in-cheek sound. It's short, sweet, everything that you're looking for in this genre, and so much more. If you want an album that is just meant to get your aggression out, there's not many albums that can top this in 2024. This is simply how it's done. First up, we have Athena 19 with Everflow Part 1, Frames of Humanity. This is the return album of the band formerly known as Athena, and they've gone through a lot of changes in the past, present, and hopefully not more in the future, because the original debut lineup is on this album, and it's so fantastic to see. This is a band that always pushed the boundaries of what progressive power and melodic metal is always about. Fabio Leone is doing some incredible work on this album, and it's so great hearing him do this style again. If you've never checked out the band before, which is entirely possible, it's been over 2 decades since the last album, this is very reminiscent of the band's previous work, but it's also updated just enough because the band has had some other offshoots like Labyrinth, Angra, Vision Divide, and other bands as well. Just that perfect blend of all of that combined. It's so great to see the band back, and the more that you hear this album, the more it's going to click with you. If you dig this style, this album is for you. Next up, we have Cassandra's Crossing with Garden of Earthly Delights. This is a debut album from a collaboration between Cassandra Crossing and George Lynch, and this is quite the trip. It hits so many different levels of hard rock, heavy metal, occasional AOR, and I almost kind of hear some power metal going on here as well. It feels like a mix of Lynch Mob, Hailstorm, and some of the heaviest aspects of the genres of metal, AOR, rock, all of that good stuff. It's quite the accomplishment. It's the kind of album that you might have to sit down and put it on to see if it's for you, because especially if you're checking out my reviews, this may not be for you. But this is a collaboration that I think is worth your time. It's a very pleasant surprise, and if you love that throwback but also modernized sound, I think you're going to find something to really appreciate about this one. Coming up next is Gia with Coma. This is the 4th album from this Portuguese black gaze post-black band, and it's easily the most emotionally driven and best album that they've done so far. It has their best production, their best songwriting. It's the perfect display of what post-black really can be. They aren't nearly as black metal on this album. There's a lot more dynamics going on, but when the black metal does hit, it strikes so hard. But when they get emotional, it will tear you up inside. It's everything that you should love about the genre if you do love it, and if you've never checked it out before, this is a perfect album to check out to see if the genre might be for you. And you really should give it a shot. You might find it's one of your favorite albums of the year. Next up, we have Gigan with Anomalous, Abstractigate, Infinite Demis. I'm sorry if I got that wrong, but what you should know is this is progressive tech death all about the kaijus in the Godzilla universe. What else could you possibly want? The music feels like a soundtrack to all the destruction when the kaijus fight each other and destroy the Japanese cities around them. It's just a perfect soundtrack to all of that. The production is brutal yet clear and also quite raw. The songwriting is so chaotic, but it has a purpose. The band isn't reinventing the wheel at this point because they've been doing this for 18 years and they know exactly what they're going for. But in the world of kaiju metal, this is some of the best stuff that's out there. And I'm glad to see that this isn't the only kaiju album in 2024 in this style as well. But seriously, if you've never checked out Gigan before, you really need to give him a chance. Next up, we have Halifron with Anatomy of Darkness. And this is the sophomore album from this band from the Netherlands that's really keeping the spirit of dark, evil symphonic metal alive. It gets as heavy and as evil as bands like Dimmu Borgir and Cradle of Filth, but they also have a sophistication to them, a very grandiose feel, kind of like the likes of Keep of Kelsian and even the Prometheus era of Emperor. This album feels like it was made in 1999 and remixed and remastered for 2024. This is meant for everyone who loves this genre. This is an authentic symphonic black metal album through and through. And if that's what you're looking for, not many people have topped something like this in 2024. You need to give it a shot. Up next, we have Jotun with Kinship. Let me get this out of the way now. This is an Album of the Year contender. Jotun, in just 2 albums, have crafted their sound to be the perfect blend of everything that I love. It's melodic death metal, it's progressive metal, it's epic heavy metal, it's folk, it's acoustic, it's some of the most prestigious clean vocals I've ever heard in an album, possibly ever. This is how you take your influences and create one of the most beautiful, cathartic, and emotionally driven albums of the year. Every track is a must listen, every note is meant to be there, there is no lulls, it's all killer, no filler. Everything about this album is for me. And even if this isn't your bag, and I can understand why, I still think it's worth a shot because you just might be won over by this. Seriously, this is absolute, unadulterated perfection. Up next is Kings of Mercia with Battle Scars. This is a sophomore album from the collaboration of Jim Matthias and Steve Overland, and it's pure, unadulterated AOR. If you love that late 70s to early 90s AOR sound, this is the album for you. Matthias has written some of the catchiest riffs he's ever written. The vocal lines from Overland is just the perfect sing-along style. Every track is just oozing of that throwback style while still feeling updated just enough. While I do enjoy their debut album, this takes everything from that album and refines it to its absolute core. No frills, no filler, just absolute perfect melodic hard rock and AOR. If you're looking for that, this album more than delivers. Next up, we have Loud Blast with Altering Fates and Destinies. Despite their debut album coming out in 1989, this is actually my first foray into Loud Blast, and I love what I'm hearing, and I'm kicking myself for not listening to him sooner. It's just death metal enough, but it has that memorable riffs and melodic moments that I love so much about old school death metal, just like where they grew up. You can hear how bands like Bloodbath and Cataclysm were really influenced by a band like this, and it's so great to see them doing that in 2024. The new album is clear and polished, but still sounds like old school death metal. The vocals are that right kind of death metal where the lyrics are intelligible, which is always a plus. And plus, it has that classic style of melodic driven death metal, especially like a band like Death. If you're like me and totally missed out the boat, get on the boat now and check out what Loud Blast has always been about. And also go back and check out their best discography. I know I'm gonna be. Up next is Low Flying Hawks with Make Believe. This is the 4th album from this Texas duo, and another album I'm just discovering this week, and I'm absolutely floored. A perfect blend of sludge, doom, post-metal, and the occasional experimental moments, and of course some great vocal clips going on as well. It also helps that even though they do the singing and guitars and the occasional keyboard work, they got the likes of Trevor Dunn and Dale Crover to be able to cover the rhythm section to make this just that much heavier and so much more dense. It's catchy, it's replayable. Even if you don't normally enjoy this style, there's something to really appreciate here. Go into this album with no preconceived notions and enjoy it for what it is. You may be shocked by how won over you are by the end. This is one of the best albums of the genre in 2024. Next up, we have Mindless Center with Metal Merchants. Even though the band's been around for 42 years, this is only the band's 5th album, and you would expect over time that maybe they would drop off in quality. I mean, that's just something that could happen after 4 decades, right? Well, that is certainly not the case here. This is an absolutely solid piece of classic heavy metal done in 2024. If you want the heavier end of the genre, this album's for you. If you want the more dynamic stuff, that is going on here too. And if you want the more memorable, melodic, and almost AOR moments, that's going on as well. The production is clear and enjoyable. It's a modern throwback in all the best ways. It shows off the classic era of the band, but it also brings things up into 2024. It's great to see the spirit of the band alive and well. Just give it a spin, and you'll understand why. Next up, we have One Morning Left with Neon Inferno. This is an absolute bonkers combination in the way it sounds on paper, but it works so perfectly. The band's 5th album is the best style of this music I've heard. It's classic heavy metal, it's second wave metalcore, it's synthwave, it's video game chiptune metal, and it's all fused together to create something that's endlessly addicting. It feels like you're back being a little kid playing your favorite classic video games, and it's all brought to life, and the music is just blasting in the background. In 2024, who doesn't want to have that feeling of nostalgia in their lives? Of course, the balance of classic and modern is here too. It never gets too classic, it never gets too metalcore, but it does have that video game 80s synthwave feel all the way through. All the sides of this band are so enjoyable, and it works together seamlessly. If you enjoy classic video games aesthetic, you need to give this album a shot. And I mean, right now. Next up, we have Poltergeist with their debut album, Knocked Music. This is the perfect Halloween album. It is goth, it is post-punk, the occasional heavy metal, but not too heavy metal, but it just feels dark, depressing, a little bit evil, maybe a little horror, but it's everything that this genre is all about. The production really makes it feel like this album came out in 1987 and it was unearthed in 2024. I really can't sell things better than that. If you dig these genres, you want to hear them together in the best combination possible, you have to get this one. These guys are gonna blow up huge, and it's understandable why they're opening for Unto Others on Halloween. Seriously, get in the boat right now. Next up is a name that I hope I get right, Shamash, with the Melodor Chants, Old Ocean. This is the band's 5th album, and there's going to be a lot of 5th albums that I'm talking about this week. This time, it's by the Legends of Asgard black metal, and this is, oddly, their catchiest album to date. It's an odd thing to say, but it just might be true. They found a way to be left of center and write riffs that will catch everyone's attention no matter the genre of heavy music you enjoy. Add their dark, sinister tone to all of it, and you got one of the best albums of avant-garde black metal in 2024. Obviously, this is for fans of bands like Deathspell Omega and Orsani Pazuzu, but just a little more cultish. This has been a great year for the strange takes on extreme music, and this is no exception. Hey, maybe you should put this album on when kids are trick-or-treating. You're either going to convert them, or you're going to make them scream bloody murder. Try it, see what happens. And finally, for brand new music out today, it is The Spirits with Songs Against Humanity. We have the latest album from this band, and they've always walked the line between black and death metal and post-black, but now it just feels like the perfect harmony of both of those genres. Don't get me wrong, they haven't gone all Harakiri for the Sky or anything like that, but it's a nice change of pace to focus a little bit more on the black gaze and post-black sound instead of just the black and death that they have been known for. It's what you've loved about the band since 2017, but just a little more updated and easily one of the best produced albums of the genre in 2024. It's a killer combination and they make it work perfectly. Pick this one up if you want to hear that combination and enjoy. And now for everything I've missed, including the brand new album from the band Breaths, with their self-titled album. This album is all about dynamics. It is post-metal, it is blackened, it is doom-gaze, it's alternative rock, and so much more. This is an album that really expands what is possible to be like a rubber band, to be able to expand and then be able to snap back into what the band is all about. It hits so close to those extremes, but it's also quite soothing at the same time. You don't find an album like this all the time, and if you find one like this, you really should give it a shot. If you do enjoy what I described, I think it's more than worth your time, and it might be exactly what you're looking for. Next up, we have Cursed Cemetery with Magma Transmigration. And this is a brand new discovery to me, despite the fact that the band has been around since 1997, and their debut album came out in 2008. And they've been drudging along ever since. And I'm so glad I found them because this is an album that feels like it was made for me. It's an unholy mix of bands like Typo Negative, Triptychon, Mournful Congregation, and just the right amount of a band like Blutas Nord. It gets blackened, it's very doomy, almost hits funeral doom, and just that right amount of avant-garde. It's dark, brooding, and it feels like the soundtrack you'll hear as you're being lowered into your grave. And wouldn't you know it, it's the feel-good hit of the summer, isn't it? Even though we're just about in the Halloween. But seriously, if you've never heard this band before, and this sounds intriguing to you at all, seriously, this is one you need to check out. Next up, we have DGM with Endless. And it almost feels like this band is endless, as this is their 12th album, and it's some of the best progressive power metal that you're going to hear in 2024. It feels like a welcoming blanket if you're into the prog power scene. It soothes you, it's catchy, it's memorable, the vocals are strong as ever, it makes you just feel like you're at home when you listen to it. Of course, so much has changed within the band since the beginning, from the full lineup to the sound to the world around us, but when you hear an album like this and you love the genre, it just feels so comforting in its familiarity, and sometimes that's exactly what you need. This is seriously some of the band's best work to date, and it's great to have them around still after all this time. If you are a prog power fan, this is an album you need to spin and enjoy. Next up is a band name that I'm absolutely going to butcher, Doheims Guard with Omniverse Consciousness. And wouldn't you know it, when you change those letters around, you get Doheims Guard. The experimental Norwegian black metal band has created a side project that reminds you so much of what the main band is all about, but with one huge difference. It is that experimental avant-garde black metal that you love so very much from this band, but it's filled with synth horror. It feels like 60s through the 80s synth horror soundtracks mixed in with that Norwegian black metal avant-garde sound that they've perfected. This feels like the soundtrack to a retro-inspired Neon or A24 horror film that's yet to be released, and I'm very curious to check that out. If you want to take a trip on the synth wild side, or you're just the adventurous type, I implore you to check this one out. Others might not get it, you might love it, but it's all in the ears of the beholder. You'll never know unless you try it. Next up, we have Embrace My Ruin with Camarton. This has been one of the best years for funeral doom metal, and it's all started to come out within the last several weeks and months, and wouldn't you know it, I found another one here. This is a debut release from this Italian funeral doom band, and it reeks of inspiration from the bands like Shape of Despair, Mournful Congregation. I even hear some Draconian in here as well when it gets a little bit gothic, but it's all done with such an authenticity that can't possibly be faked. Of course, this won't be for everyone. Funeral doom is one of the hardest genres to get into. It's slow, brooding, dreadful, and full of remorse, and it's so perfect for this time of year. But this is one for the true and cult funeral doom fans. It might be going under the radar right now, but let's change that. This is one of the best slabs of funeral doom this year, and it's quite a tearjerker in all the best ways. Up next is the brand new double album from Frost with Life in the Wires. This is the band's 5th album, and it's so great to see them doing a double album here. Over an hour and 25 minutes of prog, and it's exactly the kind of prog that you want. It gets just heavy enough, it gets just proggy enough, it gets just poppy enough, just experimental enough, and it just has a great thematic feel behind it that if you love that classic era of progressive rock, if you're a big Spock's Beard fan, if you just love the 60s, 70s, 80s progressive rock, you're going to find something to really appreciate here, and of course it does have those modern touches. It's the kind of album where you can sit down, relax, and enjoy, and just maybe put a smile on your face when you listen to this. Maybe don't listen to the lyrics if you want to keep that smile on your face. It's quite dark, but hey, I expect nothing less. Frost put out one of the best prog rock albums of 2024. Next up, we have Grand Magus with Sunraven. The band has returned with their 10th album in 23 years, and it feels like they've never lost a step. It's super catchy in the midst of all the dark, heavy riffing. It's that perfect combination of heavy metal and doom metal. If you're not familiar, imagine a great mix of Candlemass, Spiritual Beggars, Gates of Slumber, and Clutch, and you get Grand Magus. This is filled to the brim with the classic era songs, just updated enough. It feels like any of these songs would go over great in a live setting. You can imagine them playing shows with Opeth, Clutch, or Candlemass, and it would all make sense. Again, it's great to see the band in top form in 2024 writing such killer music. This is completely and utterly a solid album. Next, we have Harsh Realm with Death Carries On. Another debut album, this time some American 90s influenced death doom. It feels just like the likes of Autopsy and Incantation, just enough modern influences, and when it's not pummeling you with that absolutely brutal early day death doom sound, there's some breathing room that really has some nice atmospheric interludes. The album's just a little shy of 34 minutes, but it's the perfect length to get pummeled, leave you enough to build yourself back up and leave you wanting more before you got pummeled again. The band is starting to garner more and more attention on this one, and it's a great thing to see American death doom rising to the top again. It always needs more love, and if you love that classic sound of the first wave death doom, this is a band you need in your collection. Raw, primal, and possibly just what you're looking for. Next, we have Mother of Graves with the Periact of Absence. Sometimes you just hear an album and you think to yourself, Album of the Year contender. Yes, the sophomore album from this band is the perfect blend of melodeath, old school death metal, and doom metal. Its Edge of Sanity, Swall the Sun, Paradise Lost, Catatonia, and even Raptured, all made into one gloomy ball that is just meant for me. It feels like it hits at death metal elements, but it's so layered in gothic doom and melodeath. It's just perfection. It's the perfect balance of all of it combined, and I can't get enough. It's perfect for the 90s Peaceville 3 fans. It's perfect for modern day death doom. This is gothic doom done to its best. Everything that you want in this style is here. You're going to fall in love with this one if you love these styles. Trust me, you need this one, and only one listen will show you why. Next, we have Never Obey Again with their sophomore album, Trust. This Italian outfit made a very diverse debut album, but they figured out how to make the catchiest, most mainstream sounding albums of 2024. They refined their sound to the most core elements of what they can do. It feels like modern metalcore and alternative rock, and a little bit of dance and industrial thrown in for good measure. They know how to hit the heavier side, they know how to hit the mainstream ballad side. This feels like the kind of stuff that should be on Top 40 radio. And I honestly feel like this is the kind of good gateway album for someone who enjoys more the poppy side of music to get into metal. And if you're a diehard metal fan, maybe you can listen to this and see what's going on in the top 40 world, and maybe you can have an appreciation for that as well. That's Trust from beginning to end, and if you like what this could all be about, you should give this one a spin. Up next is Oranzi Pazuzu with Montaruja. Of course I butchered that, how could I not? This is one of the best avant-garde experimental albums of 2024, and it's the catchiest album Orsani Pazuzu has ever put out. It still has that black metal sound that you expect from them, it still has that experimental psychedelic sound that you're expecting from them, but they go into a little more mainstream direction. There's like some trip-hop beats going on here, some more dance industrial moments going on as well. Especially the rhythm section is a lot more subdued, which makes everything else be able to go experimental, and the oddball moments that you have always expected from the band. This is an album that doesn't rest on its laurels. Every time that you think you got the hang of it, it'll turn on you, keeping it fresh and interesting. If you want a true avant-garde metal album in 2024, Oranzi Pazuzu knocked it out of the park once again. Next up is Radioactive with Reset. This is some more AOR for you, and especially from this band who has put out their 6th album since 2001, it's some of the most inspired 80s AOR that you're going to hear. Every song is filled with great catchy hooks, sing-along choruses, and those guitar solos that you can only hear in AOR that are so memorable. It's a modern throwback, it's a feel-good album that reminds you of those times where things were a little more fun and things were a little bit brighter. Like the title suggests, we could all use a reset once in a while, and this is a great palate cleanser exactly for that, especially with the world that we live in 2024. Put this one on for a great relaxing time that will hopefully put a smile on your face, maybe think of times that are a little bit better, and hopefully have that reset so we can have a better future. Next up, we have Vanek with 4. Vanek returns with the 6th album in the catalog, and it's some of the best music they've put out to date. That perfect blend of horror punk, metal, thrash, and of course those horror themes that just fit so perfectly no matter the genre. It's fun, it's fast, it's intense. It's not meant to be serious music. It's very tongue-in-cheek and cheesy horror-filled, but that's what makes it so enjoyable. It can get dark and heavy and evil, but it's done in just the right way. It's not reinventing the wheel by any means, but it doesn't need to. It just simply needs to be solid from start to finish, and that is exactly what this is. It is a blood-soaked thrill ride in that grindhouse feel, and it leaves you wanting more. What else could you possibly need? Next up, we have one of the softest albums I'll be covering all year. This is Whispering Void with their debut album, At the Sound of the Heart. This is not something I would have expected. Featuring members of Gorgoroth, Trelldom, Wardruna, and Enslaved. They have created some atmospheric folk that goes from sounding like war chants, very tribal, Nordic folk, and do I hear some American country in there too? Well, I at least hear the slide guitar. This is one of the lightest albums I've checked out this year, and especially from the people involved, I never would have dreamed of an album like this, but it's one of the most striking musical experiences I've heard all year. It's emotionally driven, stellar production, and everyone from the main lineup to all the guests involved are doing incredible work. It's something that you must hear to believe. It's one of the most out there albums of the year, but once you give it a shot, I don't think you'll be disappointed. Up now, we have Winding Road with Fill My Sails. The sophomore album from the Swedish AOR band is some of the best 80s-inspired AOR I've heard in quite some time. It's so catchy, so memorable, it hits all the right notes of what I'm looking for in this style, such a great authenticity behind it, and again, it really focuses on the 80s-inspired AOR, so there's synths aplenty. You're never gonna get a monumental reinvention of the sound in this style, because there's really no need for it. You just need to be familiar, catchy, and solid. Winding Road more than accomplishes that. It's a fun listen from start to finish, and it reminds you why the genre's been around for 40 or 50 years, depending on how you look at it. That's all I need. How about you? And finally today, we end things with 1349 with The Wolf and the King. The band's 8th album in 20 years from this Norwegian satanic black metal band is everything that you expect from the band, and I can't believe that I missed out on this album. I completely did not even know they had a new one coming out, and I'm so thankful I found it now, because it just captures everything I've loved about the band over the years, but just done in 2024. And of course, one of the best producers out there, and one of the best unsung producers out there, Jared Pritchard, really knows how to make 1349 sound dark, evil, satanic, and capture that live experience in the studio. Again, Frost and company do everything that 1349 has done over the past 8 albums, but just updated enough for 2024, and I wouldn't want them to do anything else. 1349 needs to sound like the band, and they've more than accomplished that.